Yes, yes, guys. Welcome back to Nuclear Reaction Faction. We're going back to Chris Chan's Horrifying History, the documentary by Turkey Tom. Let's get it. This is part three.
Again, such as Sonichu's enemies always being conspicuously black, the text bubbles being randomly placed on the page with no discernible reading order, Chris vicariously defeating his real-life opponents such as Mary Lee Walsh and the guy who Sarah Hammer dated instead of him, so on and so forth. What was noticeable in the later episodes was that, progressively, Sonichu became a secondary character in his own comic, with the protagonist becoming Chris himself. Sonichu's function was primarily to serve and protect Chris, and every once in a while symbolically represent who he wanted to be. Additionally, other than real-life people, Chris also added a character called Crystal Weston Chandler, a female version of himself that seems to simultaneously fulfill the ideal role of the mom, the ideal daughter, the ideal sister, and the ideal girlfriend.
Okay, that's kind of a bit... It's getting into Freudian territory there.
The fact that this guy wasn't regularly seeing a therapist is a travesty, to be honest. As Megan put a healthy amount of distance between herself and Chris, his eBay purchases started drifting towards the salacious. Items include Bootylicious Love Doll, Pearl Beaded Prolong Ring, Nina Hartley's Guide to Sex Toys, and my personal favorite, Space Nuts. After years of frustration, Chris began taking matters into his own hands, and following this general theme, he also decided to give up on Santa, since for the past 3 years, he was asking for a girlfriend which Santa never delivered. 2007 begins, and Chris begins working on a new project called Yep, I'm on TV, which consists of videos he had recorded on VHS tapes burned onto a DVD. Of course, he had no idea how valuable an archive of his activities would eventually become, and most likely he just did this out of his narcissistic self-obsession with every moment of his life. Later on, the leaking of this DVD was of great assistance to those interested in the CWC lore. But at the very end of this highlight reel about Chris's life, there was one video filmed solely for the purposes of being put into the DVD called Christian Weston Chandler's Future Message.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers.
It's like if a president took 2 really strong hits of acid just before giving a presidential speech and he's just starting to come up. Wait, I can't even deal with this. It's like that World War II stuff
Leaking
again.
of this DVD was of great assistance to those interested in the CWC lore. But at the very end of this highlight reel about Chris's life, there was one video filmed solely for the purposes of being put into the DVD called Christian Weston Chandler's Future Message.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers.
In this 9-minute-long prophetic manifesto, Chris summarizes the lessons he had learned up until this point. He did this because, ideally, he wanted this video to be played in schools. In it, he goes on about why going to school isn't torture, why drinking and smoking are bad, the extreme importance of staying straight, and last but not least, that girls should consider dating uglier guys because they will have a better personality and a brighter future. It's around this time that Chris...
I think that was the main point he was driving across. Like, yeah, he probably... Like the drugs and alcohol and all that sort of thing, yeah, man. Like that's just generic like advice to kids, but like the whole dating someone ugly, that sounds quite personal.
Reconnects with Cole, his previously mentioned half-brother, to offer him a copy of his autobiographical DVD. For the first half of the year, it's business as usual for Chris, who continues to exchange emails with Megan, where she continually complains about him touching her when she doesn't want him to. By June, she leaves for Kentucky, and Chris misses her dearly since she was pretty much the only female he could get close to that wasn't his mom. This wasn't the only thing causing him to be upset though, as by the end of June, Chris's dog Patty, that he had since 1988, had to be put down. He even wrote his dog a eulogy, saying, "When Patty was brought to the vet on that faithful day, I was distraught with fright and concern for her health. I stayed with her during her final moments with my hand on her head and a tear in my eye. When my mother was brought the paper that gave the doctor permission to send her on her way, I didn't want her to be the one to sign it. I raised Patty since she was a 6-week-old pup, and I wanted to take the strain for signing the one-way ticket. It was hard for me, but it was for the best. So I signed that paper with a crying Sonichu face saying, 'We love you, Patty.' After that, I gave her my final pets, hug, hand to paw hold, eye contact, ear rub, cheek to fur rub, and I sadly waved her for the final time, and I said, 'Goodbye, Patty, I love you.' As I stood outside, I heard Patty's last bark saying, 'I will always love you, Chris. Thank you.' Regardless of how
like, I mean, it gets a bit narcissistic at the end, but like, I mean, like, it is his dog dying. I really feel for that. My family dog died when I was like, my dog growing up died when I was like a bit older, and it was kind of really tragic. But yeah, no, I really feel for him. That is horrible, man.
Horny and problematic of an individual Chris Chan is, losing a pet you've had for that long is tough, especially considering how few and far between were his sources of affection. Patty must have meant a lot for him, and it's hard not to feel for the guy. But let's not dwell on this for too long, because Chris did not either. By July, Christian had entered a contest called Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown, which was created to promote the Parappa the Rapper game that was coming out that year. The grand prize was 2 PSPs and an all-expenses-paid trip to Seattle for the 2007 Penny Arcade Expo, which Chris was hoping to use in order to seduce Megan out of Kentucky and back into his arms.
Wow.
Well, not quite back since she was never there. Anyway, this is Chris's entry if you were curious.
AP Station. My name is Christian Chandler. I live in Bucksville, Virginia. I
Okay,
have a
look,
PSP.
I'm not gonna lie. His penmanship is actually pretty good, but when it comes to actually verbally talking like this, he's not very good at
Game that
all.
was coming out that year.
That's not to slate him or other non-verbal people, but like, he just really can't talk. But in terms of like writing, his penmanship is amazing, man.
Grand prize was 2 PSPs and an all-expenses-paid trip to Seattle for the 2007 Penny Arcade Expo, which Chris was hoping to use in order to seduce Megan out of Kentucky and back into his arms. Well, not quite back since she was never there. Anyway, this is Chris's entry if you were curious.
AP Station. My name is Christian Chandler. I live in Bucksville, Virginia. I have a PSP. I like to rap. I play with the rapper. I go with you now. The only song I know is Master Onion.
July was also a very active
that
month for his
supposed to be
eBay,
rapping?
and he bought plenty of more sex dolls, adult videos, and masturbation aids of all kinds. Mind you, all of these trinkets, gizmos, and gadgets were bought on the credit card of a nearly 80-year-old Bob. Whenever he wasn't getting busy with those, he was emailing every person he'd ever interacted with in his life to vote for his Parappa the Rapper contest entry so that he'd win the prize. He even tried Cole, but to no avail, since he seemed to be interested exclusively in trashing Chris's parents. This technique must have proved effective since his video made it to the final rounds, but in early August, it was made public that the winner of the contest was not Chris, but a guy named Adam Stackhouse. Chris would put in his 2 cents about this unfavorable result. That stupid, no good Adam Stackhouse won the trip. He had music and more than one person in his video, which were in violation of the official rules. 3 other videos out of the remaining 9, Apraluski, Brutal, and Soria Buckwald all violated the official rules as well. Those 7 people of those 4 videos should have been disqualified. Period. I am so angry of the fact that the PlayStation Company and their promotional associates will not do anything to bring these violators to justice. Sworn on my autism, justice will be served to these 7 people of those 4 videos.
What the hell? Like, justice will be served. He's gonna bring about retribution. He's gonna bring about the end days, like the final judgment. Like what the hell? Like. It's like a kid's game, and it's a competition for kids, and then he's coming in as an adult and he gets pissed off because he loses. I get the whole rule breaking thing, but it's obviously for kids, man. Come on, man.
Of course, while accusing other people of cheating, Chris overlooked the fact that he himself had made over 120 fake accounts to vote for himself, as he admitted in an email to Megan. Also, his claims that Adam's video had music are based on the facts that Adam beatboxed, which hardly qualifies. In any event, his tirades continued over at his PSN blog. This is directed mostly to Adam Stackhouse, the SOB who was the alphabetically first video in the Parappa contest and got wrongfully the big prize. I loathe Adam and his sister for stealing my one chance at taking my sweet gal friend to Seattle. It would have been terrific. I might have even been able to change her outlook on not planning on having children. She and I are both virgins, although I am a frustrated, high-functionally autistic 25-year-old virgin. I don't have much going on for me, really, because I have been the dog in America's favorite game, Kick the Autistic, for my whole life. I curse those 7 people, between the cast of the 3 illegal videos, to die and burn.
Whoa.
As for Adam, if he's reading this and is asking, "You've got something to say to me?" I do. P.S. Fuck you, you dream-smashing son of a bitch.
Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised here, because I mean, he's gone off the rails, hasn't he? Like, completely. He was never really quite fully there, but like he is fully gone off the rails recently with some of his behavior. And you see these little outbursts of anger. I don't know if it's Asperger's or what, but he's got a lot of anger and rage built up. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up like actually like ending someone one day. You know, if they push his buttons too far. It's not. It doesn't that hard to get him to the point where it's like, I want you to die. Like, it doesn't seem that hard.
One thing I've neglected to mention is that while Megan was away in Kentucky, she wasn't checking her emails, so she had no idea what kind of garbage Chris was filling her inbox with. When she returned and saw what he had been up to, she once again tried her very best to shut Chris down. I just want to say that your behavior has irritated me for the last time. First, I'll start off with saying that I'm glad you didn't win the contest, because I have no interest in going on a trip alone with someone who can't keep his hands off me. I'm not your girlfriend and I never will be. When I say don't touch me, that means don't touch me. What may seem friendly to you is sexual harassment to me. You whine that you're just being friendly, but you obviously have no consideration for my feelings. Also, I can't say I like how you use my photo in your video and on the cover of your comic book. I want them removed from the internet immediately. Since I'm not a MySpace member, I can't view what you post. If there are any photos of me on your blog, I want them removed. And I don't like your Megan obsession. I don't like being a character in your comics. I don't like how you made me a character in Soul Calibur and Animal Crossing. That kind of behavior really freaks me out. With all that said, we're down to two options. A, we remain friends and only friends, period, as in no more touching me, following me, asking me personal questions, and giving me things. We can still battle and trade cards and talk. Or B, never see me again. I'm sorry.
Oh, do they sorry, I'm just vaping. Do they Pokemon battle together? That's pretty cool.
I'm down to this, but I've told you repeatedly in a nice way to stop, but you've never listened. I hope you will finally take what I just said into serious consideration, and now know that if you try your advances again, I won't be very nice about it. Despite how clear Megan was being, it would once again fall on mostly deaf ears, as Chris would reply with another email titled, "Ouch, my heart," trying his hardest to guilt trip and yakking about his love quest once again, concluding it with a declaration of his love for her. A couple of weeks go by and Chris continues sending her love mail, all while purchasing more and more sex dolls. Eventually, it seems he did take what Megan said to heart and complied with her demands, and she thanks him for it. The peace treaty between them didn't last very long after Chris began expressing his distaste for one of Megan's friends who happened to be gay.
Let's be honest, he is punching well above his weight. Like, I don't know what he's like. He's got to have some realistic goals, man.
Take what Megan said to heart and complied with her demands, and she thanks him for it. The peace treaty between them didn't last very long after Chris began expressing his distaste for one of Megan's friends who happened to be gay. After being confronted by Megan about it, Chris replied, "Originally, I was not fond of him because it was obvious that he was a homo.
Oh, no.
Yes, I am a homophobe. I fear them all, and I fear the tormenting temptations of falling off the straight path. But then I mentally, sometimes from a DVD, and if you'll pardon the expression, shove some pussy in my face. I'll tell you what, if I ever stoop down to changing my path, I might as well would get a gender change operation." Whoa. What a prophetic statement from Mr. Chandler. By some miracle, Megan is once again tolerant.
He actually does, doesn't he? It escalated quickly, man, his whole life.
The expression, "shove some pussy in my face." I'll tell you what, if I ever stoop down to changing my path, I might as well would get a gender change operation. What a prophetic statement from Mr. Chandler. By some miracle, Megan is once again tolerant and patient with him, saying she understands why he's like this, since she also had a tough time in high school and felt very lonely. In that same month, a new dimension to the CWC story was revealed, as for the very first time, an online community took note of his existence. On a thread about Eulalia on the website Something Awful, Chris gets brought up, along with his Sonichu comics. Soon, he gets his own dedicated thread titled Sonichu and His Quest for a Boyfriend-Free Girl. After 2 decades of people either pitying or distancing themselves from him due to his eccentric sensibilities, Chris finally finds his niche, a target audience of people who relish in how strange and demented he is. In the thread, people point out how his website looks like a visual rendition of a grand mal seizure. Some even theorize that there was no way everything CWC made was this naturally awful, and that he must have been doing it on purpose as a really elaborate prank or performance art piece. But a handful of the users actually had experienced Chris in person. One user said, "I posted in the other thread, but I've seen this guy in real life. This is no prank. He used to go to the college I attended until he got kicked out. If anyone here is from Charlottesville, Virginia, you may have seen him also. He hangs around the UVA Alderman Library and the Fashion Square Mall. I had seen him around campus and just thought he was in an anime club or something. I never saw him with his signs. I learned a lot more about him when he messaged my sister on MySpace and invited her out for a soda. She declined and he became increasingly more harassive towards her until she blocked him. Yes, he wears that Sonichu necklace around everywhere he goes."
Wow.
People slowly realized that Chris was definitely not your run-of-the-mill internet weirdo. Not only was it evident he was a special kind of well, special, but no one up until that point had probed the depths of the Quickie-verse. Despite how small of a community there was around Chris and Sonichu at the time, it was like stumbling into King Tut's tomb and finding mountains of archaeological artifacts that had been hidden away from the world for centuries. The same user from the previous post found and shared an updated and enhanced version of the attraction sign on Chris's website. This edition included a list of Chris's turnoffs, which are the following: smokers, real drunk alcoholics, gone to Moe's often, current/previous mothers. I support them fully, but I would not feel comfortable walking into a previously made family. I would feel more comfortable starting fresh and having my own children. Real ugly women, currently over 230 pounds, the low functionally mentally handicapped, the seriously physically deformed, autistic, high functional or otherwise, although I myself am high functionally autistic, but that's besides the point. Medium or dark chocolate, police women. What stands out, firstly, is the amount of hypocrisy in this list. Not only does he exclude the ugly, fat, and autistic, all of them being categories many would group him in with, but he says police women are a turnoff when, at this point, he had bought a total of 3 cop-themed blow-up dolls. He also mentions that mothers are a turnoff, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'll save that wretched can of worms for later. In the dark underbelly of the internet, news travels at light speed, and just a little after CWC's debut as a lolcow in the Something Awful forums, discussions about him sprung up in the cartoon and video game boards on 4chan. Unfortunately, because these were from so long ago that 4chan didn't have the reputation it currently has, and consequently, almost nobody archived what went on, we don't have all of this chatter saved. Regardless, we can imagine the kind of discussions that were going on. A few days after the word of Chris Chan had been spread around, someone named Evan from the cartoons board emailed Chris saying, "This is some fan art of Sonichu my friends and I have drawn. I hope you enjoy it." One of the attached images seemed to be a GIF that depicted Chris in a staring match with a Sonic-like figure, and that was the only attachment that wasn't a veiled troll. The first one was a drawing of Chris in his love quest with a sign that said, "No darkies," while the other two were NSFW renditions of Chris and Sonichu doing unspeakable acts. Because of his infinite naivete, Chris replied, saying, "Thank you for your fan art contributions. In constructive criticism, I like the one with me in the girlfriend auditions, as well as my glaring in the eyes of the blue guy. But I am feeling great to test towards the other two. Sonichu and I are not of that nature at all. If you would like to make it up to me, though, please draw a strip of Rosachu stripping for Sonichu, and have him fuck her, and draw Rosachu masturbating and squirting."
Whoa! That escalated flipping quickly, man. There's some dark forces at work underneath Chris Chan, man. I'm telling you.
Emphasis added. "I am straight, damn it. I will not be veered in any other disgustingly grotesque direction. Again, most nasty fan arts are not appreciated at all. Please feel free to share that quote with the rest of the fans. Sincerely, Christian Weston Chandler." Attached was an image of Chris and Sonichu staring menacingly, subtitled by the phrase, "We're keeping track." It's bad enough that Chris likes the no darkies image, but the Rosachu hentai request signals a major shift that Chris was undergoing at this time, from oddball virgin to corrupt perverts. Evan obeyed his wish, but with a twist.
I dread to think, like, what, he must have a private stash of Sonichu drawings. Like, I dread to think what's on them, man. Oh, I dread to think what's on his hard drive, mate.
Much to Chris's surprise and chagrin, Rosachu was depicted as having a giant penis. Chris replied, "Do me a favor, draw a vagina on Rosachu. Rosachu is a girl. She never had a freaking pickle. If I see one more freaking pickle, and you may spread this quote to other adult fan artists, I will create you in Soul Calibur 3 and beat you up like there's no tomorrow."
Whoa.
To which Evan responded with a simple, "Uh-oh."
That's some deep stuff he just threatened there, man. Like, that's some soul-shaking stuff.
Along with
right
another
there.
MS Paint drawing of Rosachu holding a pickle, this time literally and not figuratively. This trolling conflagration hit its peak when an article about Chris went up on Encyclopedia Dramatica. After being informed about it by 2 people who seemed to genuinely care, Chris claimed that the article caused him to have the worst weekend of his life, saying a hacking terrorist group, Anonymous, and 4chan are somehow involved in that page. When the article itself mostly went over the things we've already covered, it did so in the typical ED fashion, rife with insulting expletives directed at Chris and his creations. Along with it came a few people trolling on his email, but no one really got to him besides Evan, probably because Chris's attention was directed elsewhere. All of this obviously upset him, and a couple of days later, he expressed his disapproval of the ED page in an uncharacteristically polite and genuine way that it's hard not to sympathize with him. In the video titled Chris Chan's Public Announcement, he simply asked that the page be rewritten in a more favorable light, suggesting edits such as including his family history. According to his headcanon, he was a descendant of Anne Boleyn on his mother's part, despite the fact that Anne Boleyn never had any children. Additionally, he claims to be 1/16th Cherokee through his father, saying, "We're a respected tribe." After apologizing for anything he could have possibly done that wasn't nice, he asks that the page be taken down. Much later, Chris relayed on emails that during this time, he and his mother were badgering the management of the game place for CCTV footage to try and figure out who took that picture of him that was featured on the ED article, which they deduced must be the same person who wrote it. However, they stopped once the owner of the place threatened to ban him for a month. It's really funny how Chris isn't afraid of being arrested by actual cops like he was at Target, but if someone merely suggests taking away his ability to play Pokemon cards with preteens for a single month, he folds just like that. On November 10th, an image of Goatsy was added to the article's gallery of images above the caption, "The true brains behind Chris Chan," and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. That set him off to make an account and try to edit it into a positive light himself. Emphasis on the word try because it seems not even Christian is capable of making himself look better. He removes Goatsy along with words like retarded and scary because he doesn't like them. In the section about Evan's trolling, he replaces the phrase masturbation and squirtin' with just masturbate, and added a couple of notes that said every person is doing it and relief, with a smiley face next to it. In an attempt to defend himself from the accusations that he was racist, Chris edited in the following section. He's also old-fashioned in his idea of a sweetheart. She is not black. He is cool with adoption, but his dream of his future daughter calls for blood, tears, and sentinel descent. His verbal acumen never ceases to amaze me. In regards to the mockery of his attraction sign, he put in the only reasonable and inexpensive idea he could ever fucking think of. There was also some clarification about the medallion, which people were speculating was made of clay, but Chris specifically said it was made of Crayola model magic. This was just the first day's worth of edits. It was a day later, on November 12th, that Chris made the brunt of his most notable edits, such as commenting on his Officer Nasty doll, saying, "Nah, it's just my artificial woman in her plastic blue outfit. Awesome to and the cleaning maintenance is simple. She'll only last until she has her internal injury." Among these discretionary, even humorous additions, he also makes possibly one of the worst mistakes of his life. For absolutely no comprehensible reason, he makes multiple additions to the gallery, all consisting of hand-drawn Sonichu hentai, with the exception of two images. The first is titled Mary Wants It.jpg, a nude Mary Walsh on her evil throne, beckoning with her finger and saying, "Come and lick my pussy, my jerk-off slave." What the fuck? If you can believe it, that wasn't what got him in trouble. But the next image, the infamous Shame Came for Quickie.jpg, which featured Chris with a smirk, fingering a naked female with one hand and doing a thumbs up in the other, captioned with, "Your sister has come for me." Though obviously I can't show the whole image, people have done some anatomical analysis on it in order to understand the inner workings of Chris Chan's creative mind. People began wondering what Chris meant with the caption, because usually when doing trash talk, the target tends to be people's mom, not their sister. Discussions ensued as to what this actually meant to Chris, with some even thinking that the girl in the drawing was Crystal, his imaginary sister slash daughter slash girlfriend. Little did they know that Chris, at least at the time he wrote the caption, believed John, Megan's brother, was the mastermind behind the trolling, and the caption was meant for him. The girl in the drawing was Megan, but no one knew this other than Chris. The rest of that year's edits of the ED page were uneventful back and forth between Chris and the site's moderation. Over in Chris's emails on December 30th, he wrote and sent a poem that's quite the mouthful to say the least. "For my true love, I'd treat her tenderly, sweetly, gently, like a summer breeze. I'd caress her skin gently with my strong fingers. I'd take her to eat and provide for her to my ability. I'd start small at
We all
McDonald's.
know why his fingers are strong.
And let it get better in due time. When the mood is right, I'd whisk her in my arms and lift her up in sweet gentleness. If she is willing to allow the
It's quite
pleasure, I'd
beautiful.
lay her down, caress her gently, tickle her fancy,
Okay, now
have her
it's getting
tickle my
weird.
fancy, and give it to her with the learned, lonely experience I've endured. I have no idea how Chris's post-McDonald's erotica is more articulate than the writing of Sonichu. It's insane to think he thought this would be romantic for a woman to read. By the way, he didn't send this directly to Megan, but to a mutual acquaintance of theirs, who presumably read it before passing it on to Megan. It's unknown if it actually got to her, as there's no email of hers acknowledging any of the stuff said in the poem. For the first 2 months of 2008, there was a great quiet before the storm. That is, besides Chris getting some anal beads that came with another one of his purchases, and Megan briefly living under the same roof as him due to her having issues with her family. Given his reputation for touchiness, I'm sure she tried to keep her time there as short as possible. They're uneasy, but not quite all negative relationships.
I bet that was a desperate situation for her to end up there, and I bet Chris kind of no, I don't want to say, like, I don't take this the wrong way. I mean, I bet he took advantage of the situation in terms of to get as close to her as possible. I don't mean he did anything like that constitutes assault, but surely harassment.
Living under the same roof as him due to her having issues with her family. Given his reputation for touchiness, I'm sure she tried to keep her time there as short as possible. Their uneasy, but not quite all negative relationship survived until early March, when Megan emailed Chris thanking him for a trade and consoling him over being banned from his local church, which later we find out happened because the pastor found out about his ED page. The tune suddenly changes to a very different one come the 12th, when Chris emails her profusely apologizing, saying he was caught up in the rage when he did that, followed by a string of, "Megan, I'm sorry for hurting you." It's worth noting he doesn't specify what he's apologizing for exactly. This may seem like a random thing, but it's actually because, in their communications outside of emails, Chris was trying to pretend that the girl in the drawing wasn't Megan, but Crystal, as the trolls had supposed. At the time of sending this email, he hadn't quite let go of that lie, hence the vague language he uses. He also promises to take the ED page down, or his name isn't Christian Weston Chandler, which is interesting considering it used to be Christopher and eventually would become Christine, but that's for later. The next day, he emails her again with some quote-unquote detective work on this 4chan fella that's been ruining his life. In this one, he does specify that he was the one that made the drawing, giving up trying to dodge that particular bullet. On the same day, Megan replied saying, "I just don't know what to say now. I'm very much scared by that image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general or the fact you intentionally drew it and gave it to the..."
That's the one time I've seen you mess up in like about 100 hours worth of like intense documentary videos. I've never seen you mess up, and that's the one time. I'm pretty sure that says scarred.
Up trying to dodge that particular bullet. On the same day, Megan...
I'm gonna hold that against you now. Like you've gone down 2 respect points in the Chris Chandler respect list.
Replied saying, "I just don't know what to say now. I'm very much scared by that image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general or the fact you intentionally drew it and gave it to the webmaster..."
Oh, fun fact. The reason Chris read it as scared is because usually you only look at the first and last sentence of a word to figure out what it is, and your brain fills in the rest, and that's how we can read so quickly. So based on context, the brain fills in the middle of the word, and because scared worked in that context as much as scarred worked. Tom's mind read it straight as scared, so he genuinely saw it as scared, but it was just his brain filling in the blanks when really it was scarred. I bet a lot of people didn't even pick up on the fact that it said scarred instead of scared.
Surely would become Chris.
Don't know why I'm adding that like random useless tidbit, but it's interesting.
But that's for later. The next day, he emails her again with some quote-unquote detective work on this 4chan fella that's been ruining his life.
Look, if someone's trolling you on 4chan, just leave it, man. There's nothing you can do to make it better. All you're gonna do is throw more fuel on the fire, man. There's no reasoning with anyone on there. They're just going to milk you for every lol they can.
And he does specify that he was the one that made the drawing, giving up trying to dodge that particular bullet. On the same day, Megan replied saying, "I just don't know what to say now. I'm very much scared by that image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general or the fact you intentionally drew it and gave it to the webmaster for that site that you hate so much. Not only have you poured gas on the fire by doing that, adding obscenities to the already horrific site, but you've also embarrassed and humiliated me and degraded and demeaned me, whether you realize it or not. I mean, I'm not that kind of girl, and you know what? So why? And you also..."
So what, like, I don't understand why he keeps giving this lass, like reason to, like, how is this lass putting up with him, man? Right, after, like, we read out this message, we're going to call it a wrap for this part, because it should be about 40-50 minutes, but like how I don't get how she is still sticking by him, man. Like, she must have like the patience of a saint, like, really.
Image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general or the fact you intentionally drew it and gave it to the webmaster for that site that you hate so much. Not only have you poured gas on the fire by doing that, adding obscenities to the already horrific site, but you've also embarrassed and humiliated me and degraded and demeaned me, whether you realize it or not. I mean, I'm not that kind of girl, and you know what? So why? And you also lied to me about it. So I'm unsure what to do about this. I can't say I really think of you the same way anymore. I'm sorry to say. I will continue to give the remaining items for the Zune, and that will be all the contact you will have with me unless I decide otherwise. I hope you understand. So we'll let time decide how I feel about this current situation. Until then, Please don't come up to me anymore unless it's to give you what I owe, which seems kind of awkward now. I know how it feels to be alone, but I can't keep throwing away my pride little by little just to keep you satisfied, you know what I mean? There has to be an enough is enough at some point, and I cannot continue to disgrace myself by forgiving things that I never find forgivable in the first place. I'd like for you to just completely leave me alone for a while until I can sort things out myself, you understand? It's not like I hate you, but I don't see you in the same light anymore, so just leave me be for a while. Let me try to recuperate with my few other friends, and maybe we can just start from scratch sometime. Despite this message having a much more final perspective on Chris and Megan's relationship, by some unexplainable reason, she still leaves a window open for possible reconciliation in the future.
Yeah, that's she's got the patience of a saint. I think maybe like she saw the awkwardness in Chris and saw a bit of the awkwardness in herself and thought, oh, this will be a conducive relationship, like help each other. And then he turns out to be like some flipping like essentially like start like I'm not even gonna say it like because I don't want to get in trouble for like accusing him of stuff, but he's displaying certain behavior which is concerning regarding her. That's all I'm gonna say. Like anyway, you've been locked into Nuclear Reaction Faction. Subscribe for more. I also jumped down the YouTube Shorts rabbit hole. I've got a series on that, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.